more per student than any other large district in the state of Texas. There is not a money problem here. There is a mismanagement problem.
No, but we
Voters
spend
need to
more
know
per
that.
district because we have a high need. We are one of the few districts that has specialized special ed schools. We have high population of ELL. We have high population that are non-English speaking and low economic families. If we don't spend those dollars, and right now people are saying we're not spending enough in programming, right? Well, where are you going to get the money from for programming? You can't spend what you don't have. And so as much as you would like and I see it in my kids' schools, as much as I would love the plumber to come and fix something quickly so it doesn't become a bigger issue, then you've got the problem that we don't have enough money to be able to compete with plumbers in other districts, right? The same with everything else. If you're not competitive in wages, you know, now you've got charter schools that are being built, nice, bright, shiny schools, right next to a school that is not so bright and shiny. As a parent, you're going to look at the two and you're going to say, where do I want my kid to go? When they choose the charter school, the district is also losing students, which converts to money. So it's a round and round in circle, and until we don't cut that somewhere and start fixing somewhere, the circle's just going to keep going round and round and round and round and round.
Well, going back to the bright, shiny school point, when I was on City Council, I was given an extensive tour of the charter school buildings in East Austin. I don't think our viewers know that there are now over 15,000 kids in charter schools. Those are public schools where you have a choice to go. They get no property tax money for their buildings, none. Some of those buildings are in such poor condition that Aisd would bulldoze them. But the kids still love going there because they get taught well and they like the public charter school product. That's why they're leaving Austin Aisd, because they don't like the product. They like the charter school choice, and that's where they're going. And charter schools do not charge any property taxes for their facility, whether it's an old building or a new one. They don't charge any property taxes for their buildings.
They're also, you know, gaining benefits in other areas with the state and federal level with regard to facility funding that is not open to public ISDs. Not to mention, you have to understand too that those 15,000 kids in the charter schools are not bound by boundaries like we are with Austin ISD. So those kids are not just from Austin, they're from Del Valle, they're from Hayes, they're from Manor, so it's not really a one-to-one comparison. But the other primary reason we struggle with students in Austin is because of affordability. And it's not just affordability issues for our students and families, it's also for our staff. We're the largest Central Texas employer. We employ over 11,500 people. When you look at the other large-scale employers, they're already in the suburbs. That's where their employees also can choose to live. Their dollar stretches further, they don't have to fight Austin traffic. Our employees can't afford to live here, so they have to live outside of Austin, and then they have to fight Austin traffic. Sometimes the surrounding districts also can pay better than we can because they aren't necessarily subject to recapture. But our employees have to work in the urban core. So it's a significant issue that is challenging for us both when it comes to kids as well as recruiting and retaining a highly qualified staff.
And another issue that's really come up with this bond is how these projects were chosen. I know, you know, East Austin, a lot of people think that East Austin has been left out of this. So how are the concerns of the communities there being addressed? I'll address that to you.
So basically, what happened when the bond was being put together, the FAB Pack did meet for about 2 years, and they did look at different schools and came up with their proposal. About 6 months ago, we were hearing from the news that there were going to be school closures within the bond package that were both East and West Austin schools. And then this past May, all of a sudden, that list changed and it became East Austin schools only. So people in East Austin feel very neglected by Austin ISD, and that's one of the reasons why people have left Austin ISD to go to charter schools. The thing is that when you have these facilities or these buildings within your realm, you should be promoting the projects and the programs that are inside and providing the resources that these schools need to be successful, for these students to be successful. And Austin ISD has slowly taken away those resources from East Austin schools and provided them to other schools in other parts of the city. That's why students have left for charter schools.
And how would the trustees and the district respond to, you know, these claims that East Austin has sort of been left out of this?
I would disagree. In fact, if you look at the cost per student across the number of our schools, and information is readily available online, you'll see that we actually have to make a more significant investment, especially when it comes to the smaller schools. And I'm talking about under-enrolled schools, not smaller schools built by design. For example, Ridgetop is a small school built by design, but it's full at roughly 261 kids. But when you have schools that are significantly under-enrolled, you lose the economies of scale. Sometimes you end up only having one class per grade level. So then you don't have professional learning communities of teachers. You don't have the same academic opportunities, and it still costs you more to try to provide the basic curriculum. But at the same time, we know it's very, very challenging for us to deliver the best possible educational access to kids on that scale. That's why that economies of scale is so important, because sometimes simply the addition of another 100 or 200 kids, now that revenue generated by what we call sort of butts and seats allows you to afford an after-school program. It allows you to have some of the extracurriculars that is simply impossible to do. When 87% of our budget is already dedicated to staff, we spend as much money as we possibly can on our kids, but there's also a limit to the number of dollars that we have access to.
And talking specifically about what went into planning this, Walt has a question from social media on that.
That's right. I have a question from Catherine McLean. She's a board member with the Ann Richards School Foundation. This is her question tonight. The Ann Richards School, an all-girls Aisd public school, which is home to mostly Hispanic and Title I students, is located on one of the oldest campuses in Austin. It has leaky sewer pipes, no hot water in the locker rooms, raccoons and bats in the cafeteria, and it lacks many of the amenities a 21st century school should have. Still, these girls can boast of a 100% graduation and college acceptance rate. Can you please explain the worst first component of the bond and how it prioritizes schools with the greatest needs?
That's a great question. She paints a very vivid picture about the Ann Richards campus.
Yes. So during this process of developing our 25-year facility master plan, which is actually the first time the district has ever had such a thing, we evaluated every single campus based on two factors. One was the facility condition. That's the condition of the roofs, the walls, the HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical, and so forth and so on. Then the educational suitability is how well does that campus work for the educational programming that we need to provide students, as well as the utilization of technology. So for example, you know, many of our schools are decades old. In fact, the average age is 46 years. Most are between 40 and 100 years old. So 4, 5, 6 decades ago, schools were built with 25 seats in a classroom, teachers at the front. When we started adding things like fine arts programs, and you know, Dance Academy is a primary example. You know, we opened up a portable, we threw a mirror on the wall and wood on the floor and said, hey, guess what? Now it's a dance space. It's really not a dance space. That's very different from being able to design for spaces that actually meet the needs of the programming today, as well as the need for the technology integration. So we looked at every school got two numbers. Again, one for the facility condition, one for the educational suitability. And so looking at worst first, we actually had more that had, again, almost $4 billion in total needs in that years 1 to 6, schools that needed to receive some sort of significant modernization. And referring to an earlier statement that Mr. Zimmerman made, you know, talking about repair versus replace, we looked at 10 of the major modernization projects. The cost to repair them was 87% of the cost to replace and modernize. And when I say repair, I talk about Band-Aids. Nothing that changes the educational suitability. Nothing that changes the way we teach or the way students can move about in a classroom. So when your repair costs are 87% of what it costs to fully modernize, it doesn't make sense. It's also more efficient moving forward in terms of utilities and M&O expenses for our taxpayers. And bond dollars all stay here, unlike that M&O tax rate dollars.
And talking specifically about the Ann Richards School, I mean, they are getting $70 million in this bond, I believe. And I know you had a comment on that.
I do, actually. I want to address what Cindy just said. The problem is that Austin ISD has not been honest with this entire bond package. They say that the worst first schools will be receiving the funds, but we've done our research, and it's not the worst first. It's the loudest first. One example, Bowie High School is receiving $91 million, which is 8.6% of the bond. Out of all of the high schools, it's the one that's getting the most money because they're the loudest people. And you have other high schools throughout the district who are getting way less. For example, Travis High School is only getting like a couple of $1 million, and it's not fair to the other schools that the ones that complain the most or the ones that write emails the most to the trustees are the ones who are going to receive this money.
I disagree. And actually, worst first for us also includes situations like overcrowding. Some of those facilities might not be the oldest or in the worst condition, but we have kids eating lunch on the floor, kids that are in a lunch line between 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. because we have so many kids that we have to try to serve. And that's just an example when it comes to lunch spaces. When it comes to classrooms, there's severe overcrowding, and nobody wants their child in that sort of learning environment. So Worst First also includes things like that, and so you will see some differential between the condition indices as well as some of the other very, very challenging problems. And buoy actually was one of the projects that was in the 2013 bond that didn't pass.
I need to speak briefly to that point about the 87%, to repair versus replace. These are very critical numbers, and back in June of this summer, I did a public information request and collected all of the emails surrounding the decision to condemn, to close T.A. Brown Elementary, and it was very interesting what came out of that. But to summarize, the problem with these numbers, they're being exaggerated by corporations that stand to profit from demolishing and rebuilding these structures. In other words, the numbers and all the data that's been referenced here are coming out of a conflict of interest, because the same people that are giving these exaggerated numbers and these inflated values for repairing buildings, they're going to profit by a factor of 10x. If they can destroy a building and rebuild it for $30 million, they make 10 times more in profits than if they repaired it for $3 million. And that's why they're exaggerating the numbers. And that's why if you look at the donations to the PAC, you'll see $85,000 of corporate contributions from the very companies that are going to profit from these exorbitant, overpriced projects.
Well, and we can talk later about the benefits of the bond to the local economy, because they are pretty substantial when it comes to being able to support local businesses. But regarding what Mr. Zimmerman just said, because we have so little funds, we don't have money to burn or to flush down the toilet, so to speak. So when we have to shutter a school mid-year, displace hundreds of kids, we don't do that lightly. The engineers that issue those reports are certified, and if anyone has an issue with that, they can certainly take it up with the certification agencies. But I do want to add another little point, because when it comes to being mindful of taxpayer fatigue and taxpayer expense, at the same time, some of Don Zimmerman's advocacy efforts have actually cost Austin taxpayers millions of dollars. He filed a lawsuit, for example, after the 2013 bond, which ended up resulting in over $16 million in delay costs for construction, as well as additional interest rates. And those requests for information that he talks about, we don't have extra staff to do that. So the staff that has to answer them, including our CFO, that's a significant amount of their time. And I'm talking about over 100 hours, and at the estimated expense of about $20,000 just this year alone. So at the same time, I think that some of these advocacy efforts might be better served at the state level, working on school finance formulas, because he's actually costing Austin taxpayers millions of dollars himself.
I appreciate the attack. Let me answer it briefly. That lawsuit was about the language that you see on the ballot proposition. The words that I read, without limit as to rate or amount, are required by state law. We had to sue the Austin School District to follow the law that requires them to disclose that your taxes can increase without limit as to rate or amount. That's in the Texas Education Code and bond finance. In other words, Aisd deliberately violated the law to conceal the cost of the bonds. We sued them. We did not win, but now the words are back into...
How did we violate the law? I feel like
you violated the law.
The
district violated the law, and now the words are back into the ballot language. So our lawsuit resulted in Aisd following the law and admitting the taxes are unlimited.
So talking specifically about that language, because you've brought it up a couple of times, and this is what voters are going to see on the ballot when you go to, to vote. What does that mean, without limit? What exactly is that saying to the voters?
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to emphasize the fact that our tax history is public record. We have two different tax rates. We have the M&O, which is the maintenance and operations. That's what pays for everyday stuff: salaries, buses, food, services, that kind of thing. And then we have the INS rate, which is the debt repayment rate. So the M&O rate has remained flat for, I believe, a decade. The INS rate has actually gone down by 5 cents in the last 3 years. So when we say that we're not going to increase the tax rate because of the implementation of this bond, I feel like we have the history to not only prove that we've been very consistent in what we've told taxpayers and what we've actually achieved. At the same time, we have some of the highest debt ratings amongst public school districts in terms of how we service that debt, as well as other financial transparency awards. We have a proven history when it comes to how we manage our taxes, manage our debts, and how we benefit taxpayers.
Well, some people also have been asking, why not wait and pay for the items as the district gets the money instead of adding the debt now?
Because
it doesn't work that way.
Yes.
I mean,
and because as property values go up, and Austin's property values look like they're going to go up, okay, that means that more taxes are being paid. which means more recapture money to the state. So I don't know the exact amount, but it is projected to be close to $800 million in the next 2 years, correct?
Closer to $1 billion.
Okay, closer to $1 billion. So now we're paying the state in recapture money more than our actual operating costs are today. It's like your home. If you have a home and you have to repair the basement because you have mold, don't think that by sanding that black stuff away, the mold's going to go, right? You're going to have to spend the money to replace that whole beam, because otherwise your house is going to fall. If you have a leaky roof, yes, we can go up there and spray some tar and put some tarps and it will be great, but the problem's not going to go away. They're Band-Aids which just are going to get, and so if we don't take care of them now, then in 5 or 6 years' time, even if we did have the money because we got an angel donor out of somewhere, now instead of costing X, it's going to cost 3X. It doesn't make any sense.
And the cost of replacing a school, for an elementary school, it's 25 to 35 million. For a middle school, it can be upwards of 60 million. For a high school, a comprehensive high school of roughly 2,000 kids, it's 150 to $200 million.
All right, let's go ahead and take another one of our video questions. I know we have some good ones.
One of my questions was, when I was looking into it, was how it'll affect the schools that aren't being shut down, specifically Austin High, because I have a daughter that attends Austin High.
Okay, so yeah, we've talked a lot about, which campuses need a lot of attention, ones that are closing, but how about the ones that will not be rebuilt, or, which campuses are seeing what? She was talking about Austin High there.
Okay, so on our website, which you can access through the main Aisd website as well as aisdfuture.com, you can actually see an itemized list for every school that shows exactly what they're going to get in terms of the dollars allotted for technology, in terms of what their identified critical deficiencies are, how much they're getting for safety and security. So every school has an itemization of that on the website that you can see. There's also breakdowns of how much is being spent per vertical team, which is the feeder patterns of elementary, middle, and high, as well as different parts of town. And something else I want to mention too is that I-35 used to be sort of the delineator of poverty in Austin. That is no longer the case. In 2016-17 school year, we had 77 Title I schools. And of those 77, 40 were east of 35, 37 were west of 35. We're a minority district. We had 77 last year. I believe we have 79 this year. Majority poverty district. We have economically disadvantaged kids in every single classroom on every single campus.
I want to speak quickly to that. Around the district, there are signs, huge signs that have been erected talking about all the benefits that people are going to get out of the bonds, various projects and hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars that are going to go to each school. Big signs prominently placed. Now, we're investigating criminal complaints against this illegal advocacy, and the reason it's illegal is it talks about benefits, 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 benefits. Nowhere does it cite cost. What is the cost of these benefits? There's no information about cost. Now, when you look at the information, it's got a website. It says, go here for more information. I went there for more information. Now, the $1 billion is about a 100% increase in the debt for Aisd, but when you go to the website, it says 60% debt decline in the next 10 years. It's just misleading advertisements. This kind of stuff is ridiculous. What the district is doing is talking about benefits, 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 and not talking about the cost. And this has got to stop. There's one more thing I want to add to that. We were alerted, somebody at the Davis Elementary School distributed this flyer. This is also illegal advocacy. This was sent home with kids. And it talks about benefits, 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 benefits. And right here under taxes, and I'm quoting from the flyer, the taxpayer would incur no additional taxes from this bond. This is from Davis Elementary. There's no disclosure down here except davisdolphins.org. If you go to that website, it's the website for the Davis Elementary School. And the contact page lists the principal. This is unethical and it's actually illegal. And this kind of advocacy has got to stop.
Yeah,
But what I'll say though is that no, there's a difference between providing information and advocating. He didn't read that it said vote for Proposition A for Aisd. We clearly have a lot of information on our website. That's considered informative and being transparent on a number of levels. And yes, you're right. There's a difference between a tax rate and a tax appraisal. And we've always been very, very careful about distinguishing between the two. By the same token, folks' property values are going to increase or decrease based on how Travis County assesses them from year to year. That's going to happen regardless of whether or not we go out for a bond. Whether or not the tax rate increases is something that we have control over in terms of adding to that increase or decrease that's already determined by another entity. Okay, so in other words, whether the bond passes or fails, it's not going to impact the amount of taxes they pay next year or the year after that. That's based on their appraisals. Now, what I'm sure you're going to comment on has to do with the debt service. So yes, we incurred debt as a result of borrowing $1 billion. But at the same time, once voters give us approval, we don't go out the next day and borrow $1 billion. It's kind of like when you think about a credit card. You get a credit limit of 10 grand, you don't go out the next day and you know, run it up to $10,000. You borrow a little, you pay it back, you borrow a little, you pay it back. The same goes for us. We're constantly refinancing, we're taking advantage of low interest rates that have to do with those financial ratings that we have that allow us to have access to some of the lowest interest rates ever. And yes, we pay that debt over a period of time. Typically for bonds, it's about 25 years, but for certain items like technology that have a significantly lower sort of shelf life, so to speak, we pay them on a much quicker repayment cycle. Usually it's less than 5 years.
So that's how the district is saying that
Yes.
your taxes will not be going up.
Yes.
Well, now they're saying the tax rate.
The
But
tax
again,
rate.
here's what's deceptive, and here again is why it's advocacy. Nowhere on any of the district's educational materials will you hear what will happen to your taxes if you vote against the bond. If you don't borrow $1 billion, your taxes could go down.
That's highly unlikely.
Your
If this
wait, I'm not done. Your taxes could go down, and they should go down, because as you pay off debt and as you don't incur new debt, your taxes must go down. The reason your taxes aren't going down is because the district is greedy for money. Just because your appraisals go up doesn't mean your taxes have to go up. They could lower the tax rate so you could pay the same amount. This is the biggest fraud that the Austin School District and other government entities do. I used to be the president of a utility district, and we set a budget and we set a tax rate. We were paying off bonds in my municipal district. Our debt was lowered every year. Appraisals went up every year, and the out-of-pocket tax bill went down every year, as it should, because as you pay off debt, you're able to charge less in taxes. Your taxes should be going down every year because the bonds are being paid off.
No,
but the district deliberately charges more when they don't have to.
And before we go on with this, we do have another video question, and it kind of relates to this because this is from somebody who's wanting to buy a home in Austin.
Thanks for looking into this. Yeah, I'm looking at buying a house, so I'd want to know how much my taxes are going up.
That's the question, and that's really what people go to the polls thinking. They vote with their pocketbooks, of course. So now you're saying that this is not the case. You disagree with Mr. Zimmerman.
Well, I disagree with this. A couple of things that he said. First of all, if the bond fails, tax rates are unlikely to go down, because the reality is that, again, we would have to pay for all emergency repairs, critical deficiencies out of those M&O dollars. The formula for school finance increases every single year for us. We're approaching from 39 cents on the dollar being sent to the state up to 50 cents on the dollar 2 years from now. And so we are getting less and less revenue generated by that revenue, that M&O tax rate. By the same token, appraisals in Austin go up to 10% every year. So apparently what he's suggesting is we actually lower our taxes, or tax rate rather, to account for that 10% increase in taxes by Travis County. That's not feasible for us to do. Again, when 87% of our budget is people used to educate children, that's simply impossible. At the same time, if you are leveraging your advocacy efforts down the legislature, the amount of dollars we could save taxpayers in fixing the school finance formula is far more significant than a couple of cents on the dollar that he's actually talking about.
I don't think it's fair to blame the legislature for mismanagement by the school district. And a lot of these,
if we were
these
mismanaging
taxes
our dollars,
people
do you
are being
think we would have
overcharged.
financial ratings that we do? Do you think we would be winning transparency awards and
Well,
other awards?
I can
And
tell
I'd
you.
like to ask the question, how much, what quantity of money do you put on a child's safety and on a child education?
I would put
What-
it in the charter
what-
school where
what-
there's choices.
what-
There's better education,
But you
there's
have
better
their
discipline,
educational
and there's a
outcomes are
choice to
not
go
better.
there.
They're not-
That's
no.
not true.
No.
The
By and
outcome of
large,
the charter,
statistically
the outcome
speaking.
of the charter schools is as good or better than AI's.
you know
But
what,
more
the outcome-
importantly, parents and kids get to choose to go there.
So
That's
what-
incredibly important to the education experience.
Okay.
The charter school has a choice. The parents and the students have a choice. That's what makes that experience so good. They don't charge extra taxes for their buildings. They're getting great results. They're doing a better job educating with less money. The problem with AISD is mismanagement. They're losing students because they have an inferior product. And people are really tired of the district blaming the legislature and blaming Robin Hood, blaming everybody for their mismanagement of money.
You don't have an inferior product when you have over 90% of your students graduating from high school in a 4-year period of time. Our academic outcomes outweigh a lot of our peers at charter schools. We offer things they do not. Fine arts, libraries, social and emotional learning, dual credit. We have 6 high schools now that offer associate's degrees at the same time kids graduate from high school. You don't see those in charter schools.
We heard those messages, and the district has spent millions of dollars on advertising, trying to convince people of things that aren't true. People are voting by leaving AISD. Enrollment continues to drop no matter how much money.
And how much, and I want to say, what is the accountability of those charter schools?
They're accountable to the parents that send their kids there.
And
that's the accountability. That's the accountability that matters. The accountability that matters is parents get to send their kids there by choice. That's the accountability that matters. If you want to say that the government bureaucrats care more about your children than parents, that's a ridiculous assertion. The parents care more about their kids than anybody else. They're choosing charter schools. We need to vote against this bond so they'll have more money for the education of their choice.
Hopeless ISDs also don't get a choice to follow Texas accountability statements. Not an option.
All right, we want to talk a little bit about, this is something you addressed a little bit ago about the demographics really in Austin and in the Austin district. Some people who are worried about this bond, they're saying that there's going to be changing student populations at the school. So how much thought is really going into the changing demographics of AISD and Austin in general? You were talking about how I-35 used to be that, you know, kind of delineator for that, but that's changing in essence. So how's the district accounting for that?
Okay, so first of all, every year we get demographic reports for Austin. And you know, those are based on sort of where kids live. There's also a differentiating factor as to where kids choose to go to school. About 88% of our families choose their neighborhood school. About 12% exercise a choice option within AISD. Okay, and so, but as I was mentioning earlier, you know, I-35 used to be sort of that delineating line for poverty, and that no longer exists today. When it comes to how we try to evaluate what we offer students and programs, we do spend more for students who have special needs, whether it's a student who's in special education, an English language learner, an economically disadvantaged kid. And you know, every school is also assigned Title I dollars that meet the criteria for, like I said, we have about 79 Title I schools this year. There were 77 last year. And actually in AISD, more schools would meet the federal level of Title I, but there's a limit as to how many dollars we can get from the feds. And so 130 campuses, 79 today are considered to be Title I schools. And so we do have to evaluate that. We also have to look at other things. You know, how do we provide things at Title I schools that we can't provide at other schools because the need isn't necessarily there? Sometimes it's after-school programs. We support parent support specialists that work with our Title I schools for family engagement to help organize wraparound services that our kids need. There's a lot of additional resources that are fed into our Title I schools that other schools do not get. And again, some of those other schools have 50% poverty, 50% demographic of minorities and other kids. We also have huge refugee populations throughout Austin, and it can be very challenging to try to meet the needs of all of those students, and it's very, very expensive to do so, and we try to do that within the best of our ability.
All right, now let's go over to Walt. He has another question from social media.
Thanks, Emma. We're getting a lot of engagement on Facebook Live. If you want to join us on Facebook, just go to CBS Austin and ask questions on there as well. We'll try to get those answered. And Mr. Zimmerman was talking about the education experience. Here's a related question. Karen Flanagan has a question about the education master plan. She says, in the 1970s, schools had an open concept of teaching. Anderson High School's third floor was open. I was a student at that time, and having a class in the third floor wing was chaos. Noisy from students talking, distracting with students moving about, and noisy from many teachers giving instruction. Now the third floor has walls. Tell me, what is different now that you think the open concept will work and benefit student learning?
Okay, who wants to field that one?
Well, and I think that it's construction has changed, right? From 1970 to 2017, technology has increased. The ability that what we can do is incredibly different. There are new ways of buildings. There's a lot that has changed. And so I know visiting one school, there is a concept where you can open walls open a wall to make a big cafeteria room and close it again to make new doors. And these are things that is not going to interrupt the noise. So now you're making the most use of your space for what is needed. So that, for example, just thinking off the top of my head, could be the dance practice or the band practice and not have kids practicing in hallways, the band practice, and then when band class is over, you zipper that up, and it's not these accordion old things that we've all seen in our cafeterias that are half falling apart, right? The technology has changed. Their building materials are different. And with that, you can add. The way of teaching is different too. Cindy was saying it earlier. There's no more this 25 teacher stands in front of a room and you're there, you know, making people memorize. There's project-based learning. We live in a global world. We need to make sure our children know how to interact with people and help on projects and do, you know, the days of sitting in your office now are over. The world's changing and we need to prepare our kids for that changing world.
I couldn't agree more, and I want to go back again to the ballot language, to a really remarkable and I think ridiculous statement in the ballot language. It says, reinvention programs for 21st century learning. That's an interesting, very subjective. What is 21st century learning? It sounds to me, I keep hearing about buildings and buildings and buildings. Buildings is 17th century learning. 21st century learning doesn't even need a building. It needs a high-speed internet connection. You could have a world-class teacher giving simultaneous instruction to students scattered not just around the city, but around the world. That's 21st century learning. You don't even need a building. We already have buildings. What you need is a high-speed internet connection. So this whole thing of focus on buildings is taking us back to the 17th century when we had no internet and we had no technology and we didn't have the ability to have decentralized learning. Now we do. So the district wants to take us backwards to the 17th century and call it 21st century because it's all about buildings for them. It's not about teachers, it's about buildings. There's no money in this bond for teachers.
We can't. We're barred by law. Bonds have to be related to capital expenditures.
When I was
facilities,
in 7th grade,
that's why we're talking about buildings.
Hang on, money is being spent on Sunland Group corporate contractors that go through and decide that buildings need to be demolished. That came out of our public information request. 2013 bond money is being used to pay corporate contractors to decide that buildings need to be demolished so that their corporate friends can make millions in profits by rebuilding, demolishing and rebuilding repairable schools. I mean, it is not true what you're saying. Money is being used right now, bond money is being used to pay contractors to decide to tear our buildings down.
Contingency fund money are being used to assess issues related to facilities. It's not the same thing as paying a teacher. And going back to what is 21st century learning, it's outdoor classroom spaces, it's integrated technology. When buildings were built 100 years ago, the cost of upgrading them to accommodate modern technology is extraordinarily expensive, and it doesn't necessarily work the same way. At the same time, with these new facilities, they can also be designed for the programming that we offer today. Some examples of that are some of the programs that we've already started at LBJ and Reagan, the career launch programs. The one at Reagan is related to information technology. The one at LBJ is relative to health science and nursing professions. If you go and look at those spaces, you'll see what we're talking about. For health sciences, we're talking about different kinds of lab spaces. Kids studying to be nurses need lab spaces that accommodate hospital beds and anatomical dummies and other equipment that doesn't fit in the regular size classroom. And those old buildings, the way they were built, don't allow you structurally to make those kinds of modifications. And so there's significant design changes in this, and we developed new education specifications for the new facilities that will allow us to change the way we teach and the way our students learn.
You know, I didn't go to school in the United States. I grew up in Australia. But I remember when I was in 7th and 8th grade, and we're talking back to 1981 and 1982, I used to walk into a science lab in 7th and 8th grade, and there were big tables with your Bunsen burners and your things to be able to conduct experiments.
That's what it looked like when I went to high school too.
Okay.
So
that doesn't look like that in middle school. And you try to do that and you can't because the plumbing is all the way over there, and if you lift up the floor, you've got this, and then you can't. I suffer for my daughter who is now an 8th grader, and you say, okay, well, you know, you spend more time setting up an experiment and a lab than you do learning from it, because by the time you get everything out and put it on these little tables that, you know, are half wobbling with rolling chairs that, you know, you can knock something over, where is that's 21st century learning? You can't teach medical stuff without the hospital beds. You can't teach, you're talking about, you know, internet. okay? I don't know about the rest of you, but I have a hard problem getting internet in my house because it was built in the 80s and the walls aren't built for Wi-Fi. You go to any of our schools and if you get a good spot where you're trying to send an email or where you're looking up in something and it doesn't work. They're not built for these internet and for Wi-Fi. They're not built for that.
Part of the reason why Dawn is saying that Aisd is mismanaging its money is because the bond package is saying that they want to close or consolidate 5 schools, and at the same time they want to build 5 new schools. We need to think about the fact that Aisd is losing students every single year. A couple of weeks ago, we actually heard from the Statesman that they've lost 1,600 students this year alone. So how do you justify getting rid of the 5 schools in East Austin to build 5 new schools, primarily in West Austin?
Okay, first of all, the bond is not necessitating that.
It does necessitate that.
It doesn't necessitate that.
Consolidation is in the bond.
Not necessarily for 5 schools.
It is.
There's money in the bond that allows for community conversation to do a modernization project. But let me ask you a question. So you ask, if we don't need to build new schools, then what about affording to keep schools open that are half full? If you're talking about balancing enrollment, why are you against the need for consolidation to provide better academic opportunities for kids?
It's not about the students. You guys are only discussing money at this point.
That's not true.
Yes, it is. And part of the problem is that these schools are very loved by their community and they don't want to close down. And you had different schools on the list of closure just 6 months ago. All of a sudden, only the schools in East Austin are being considered for closure or consolidation.
That's actually not true.
It is true. It's in the bond. If you look at the modernization package, that's in the bond.
But they're being considered for a modernization project. We have other areas of Austin.
And it says we'll consolidate these schools. I saw a sheet that shows Met, Zavala, and Sanchez. All 3 of them will be consolidated with that $25 million package that is in the bond program.
So let me first again emphasize that there are other areas of Austin that have chronic under-enrollment. Those schools are not earmarked for a $25 million modernization project. We specifically targeted certain projects to East Austin to help revitalize them.
They're only in East Austin.
The 2 top projects, yes, are only in East Austin.
All 5 schools are in East Austin.
They're also some of the most historically under-enrolled schools.
And that's your fault as a trustee for not helping those schools come up to par, bring more students to those schools, bring more programs to those schools so that they're not under-enrolled. That's your responsibility as a trustee, and it's the superintendent's responsibility as well.
And we do that, and as Don indicated, we actually spend money to market. We can only do so much, though. Families cannot afford to live in Austin.
That's one reason.
Are we supposed
it's not all of the reasons.
It's a significant factor. So are we supposed to also pay for families to move into East Austin?
That's a ridiculous question.
No, it's not.
It is.
Most of if we're just talking about the East Side Memorial Vertical Team, which is what I believe you're talking about right now, almost every single one of their schools is at 50% or less enrollment to permanent capacity.
But you have schools in West Austin that are also more under-enrolled.
That are not choosing those schools. There is a lot we can try to do to help promote those schools, but at the same time, some of them have struggled with not meeting accountability standards. So how do you market a school that is historically academically challenged to a parent that is going to use that as a factor in considering where to send their child?
And can I also add that those 5 schools that are up for closure are meeting academic standards?
Okay, so kind of as we're getting closer to wrapping things up, you know, there's no denying that a lot of Aisd campuses, they need improvements. You know, you can't deny that some of them do need fixes. So if this bond doesn't pass, what happens in that case? You know, you're saying that
basically the bond is the easy way out for Austin ISD, for the trustees and for the superintendent. It's the easy answer. If the bond fails, then they have to do their homework. Then they have to get to work. Then they have to figure out how are we going to fund all of these things that need to be funded within the school buildings. And I think that's the reason why they felt that this was an easy way to get the $1 billion to be able to fix some of these issues. But in reality, like Cindy said earlier, we do have $4 billion in needs. So how do you figure that out? And the thing is that taxpayers need to understand is they're going to come back for more bond money, and they will be coming back very soon. It happens on a regular basis.
We do. But at the same time, if the bond fails, so again, we don't have enough money today to pay for the critical deficiencies and the modernizations that we need. If this bond fails, what do you think is going to happen? We already are paying more money to keep kids in schools that are significantly under-enrolled, and we know we're not able to deliver the same high-quality education that we want to. It's more expensive, and when you have schools, again, that have 200 kids in one class per grade level, it's not economically savvy to do that. How do we tell the taxpayers we're going to keep all these schools open just because they're favored? And I know that they're the center of the community. That's why our families, 90% almost, choose neighborhood schools. We absolutely value that. But at the same time, there is only so much money. So also, in addition, if the bond fails, we may have to look at asking voters for a tax rate increase. The taxes are not going to decrease because that $4 billion doesn't go away. It actually compounds. You know, additionally, we can't provide technology anymore. We can't replace buses that are aging and need to be more energy efficient. There's a lot of things that we will not be able to do for our kids, and no matter how hard any single one of us works, it's going to end up in very likely on an accelerated rate, consolidations and closures and teacher layoffs. And even then, the M&O we save from operating a school, from elementary school, it's about $3 million. That only takes us so far. Our budget is $1.3 billion before we give the $500+ million away to the state. There's only so much money.
You know, asking AISD to be efficient with money and to try to stop taxing people out of their homes, it's like asking the Bastrop wildfire to just stop burning. It'll never happen. You know, the lust for money and the greed for money out of the government school seems to never end. And the good news here about if the bond goes down and people can maybe afford to live in their homes a little longer because the taxes can go down, the taxes can go down, the taxes can go down because when you pay off debt, you don't have to charge so much for debt taxes. But the good news is that more charter schools are opening to meet the incredible demand. There are thousands more students that are eager to escape failing AISD schools. Those charter schools are going to open, and they will charge no additional property taxes for their facilities.
Can I ask you a question? How are those charter schools funded?
They're funded through state dollars.
And how does
about
state
$8,600 per student compared to $11,000, over $11,000 that AISD is spending after recapture.
And how do the state get the money to fund these charter schools?
It comes through our taxes. Absolutely.
Exactly.
It comes through our taxes.
Yes.
It does not come through our Austin local property taxes.
It doesn't matter.
It's coming from a larger pool, and they're doing a better job.
It's coming from the general fund, which we contribute into.
They're doing a better job on less money, and they're not increasing our local property taxes.
So what you're saying is that my taxes that I pay on my home, part of it is going to the state, and they're taking part of that and giving it to a charter school.
And the parents prefer that way to spend their money, and I support them in that.
Wait, they get, okay, but now, so it's taxpayers' money with no accountability.
That's a false statement. The accountability is
It's not a false statement. They are not subject to the same account. No, you're talking about parents, but parents and state accountability is very, very different. Secondly,
but the parents are what
I'd also like to emphasize that
accountability is the most important. Okay, I'm not concerned about government accountability. I want parents
with the quality of
and
education, but their child still can't read.
The charter schools are doing as good or a better job than the
so
monopoly schools. And that's why people are choosing to go there.
Okay, so if we go to
charter schools without increasing local property taxes.
If we go to charter schools, because an AISD child that goes and enrolls at any one of our 130 campuses cannot be denied access to that school. If you go to a charter school, if you're a special need child, forget it. If you've got dyslexia, don't worry about it. If you're ADHD, they'll just say you're full, and those parents have no choice. So when you say charter schools is a choice, it's only a choice for a very small amount of family. It doesn't serve every child. And I don't care what the disability, whether a child is one race, has a certain amount of money or not, every child, every single child in this world, not even in this state and not even in this district, deserves and has a right. And we owe them an education, no matter what they lack. And so what do you do with those? If you're so anti-public school, district, because it sounds to me like you're anti-district schools, what do we do with the special needs? What do we do with the children at Rosedale that are, I mean, severely medically disabled with breathing tubes and with that? What do you do for those children? Do you say, I'm sorry, you don't deserve an education because the charter schools can and do say no to your entry?
You know what? You are correct that I'm opposed to public monopoly schools and that I do support public charter schools, and there is always a solution. For AISD to claim that they're the only ones that have a solution for special needs students is frankly ridiculous. Lots of people have solutions. What they need is the freedom, the liberty to go to a school of their choice. And we could have more charter schools that could take care of these special needs kids. It's absolutely possible. It is the way forward. It's a more economical and it's a sustainable way to go. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I just want to say that the Save East Austin Schools PAC is in favor of public education. We are all products of Austin ISD. And the reason why we formed the PAC is because we see a lot of these inequities happening only in East Austin. And when you talk about the students who have all of these needs, don't bring them into this bond when it's all about the money. If you go onto AISD's website and take a look at the video that was created for the bond, it only discusses money, and at the very end, it shows pictures of children. It's not about the students at all. This is a developer's bond. There's companies lined up to receive money out of this bond already today, even before it passes.
Okay, so first of all, I want to add something too, because my understanding also, not only does Mr. Zimmerman appear to be anti-public education, kids also have a choice, and almost 82,000 of them choose Austin ISD. And it's also my understanding that you don't even live in Austin ISD boundaries or pay Austin ISD taxes. So for you to be the one so
neither
vehemently
does Ascension Healthcare, and they donated $25,000 to pass this bond. Ascension Healthcare doesn't live in the district either, and they donated $25,000. I want you to be offended at that outside money interfering in this bond. Will you be offended
I'm also
at that
offended that you're arguing over pennies on a tax rate when you could be advocating down at the legislature to make a more significant impact to our local taxpayers of hundreds, if not in the neighborhood of probably $1,200 to $1,400 per median home value. That is where the savings is. And while, yes, we can try to manage our taxpayers, and we are very, very careful about what we ask our taxpayers to do with regard to the tax rates, as I said, our M&O rate's been flat for a decade. Our INS rate has gone down. We've got a history of being very, very fiscally sound and efficient in how we manage our stuff. You can disagree all you want to.
That's comical. The taxpayers are infuriated with the taxes here in Austin. They're out of control.
Yes, they are.
They're out of control because of mismanagement of the district.
No, it's not. A big driver of that is recapture. Another driver of that is property value assessments. A lot of folks think it helps us when property values continue to rise. But as Tony said earlier, the portion that we get from the increase, actually our portion of recapture increases as well. And because Austin becomes less affordable, we can't attract and retain a highly qualified workforce. Our families can't afford to live here. They're having to move further and further out to the outskirts, which is where you also see the overcrowding.
Okay, we just have a couple of minutes left, and I do want to talk about, this is something that you mentioned, how the district is losing students. So we just have 4 minutes left here. So where does this bond play into that? Because, of course, the goal is the district wants to have students staying in school here in Austin.
The bond does not guarantee students coming into the district. The problem is that the bond is not funding programs or it's really just for the facilities, like Cindy said earlier. I want to ask you a question. How can you say that this bond is desperately needed by Austin ISD and at the same time say that you're being fiscally responsible? It doesn't make any sense.
It does when our students are in facilities that have significant challenges.
But again, those facilities have been under your care for years. So why are they in that?
Not even a year.
Under AISD's care for years. Because so why have they allowed to get into this place?
Because we have not had the money. Again, our revenue.
That's a red herring.
It's not. Again, go down to the legislature and advocate.
The legislature is not the only group that funds Austin ISD.
The finance formula that would give us more dollars to do that. Every year there is a limit to money. It's like anyone's personal budget. There is only so much money you have. We do have to keep reserves, and there's a reason we have to keep a certain amount of reserves because it has to do with the timing that we get the actual tax revenue from the city, or from the county rather. And so we have to always have that money in reserves. But this district is looking at also a $50 million shortfall.
But the bond is not the only answer to the financial needs that the district has.
No, it's not. But the other issue with that has to do with enrollment. It has to do with utilization of our campuses. Again, when it costs more to do the same thing or not even be able to do the same thing in schools that are at less than 50% capacity.
A lot of them are in West Austin again. Only the ones
they're across the district.
Okay, so we just have a couple of minutes left. I want to get a wrap up. You know, we kind of get a sense of where you guys all stand on this. I'm going to go around to each one of you and give me a quick sum up of how people should vote starting Monday.
Terrific. The Taxpayers Union urges people to vote no. Please, please read the ballot language, because if you vote yes, you are voting for, and I quote from the ballot language, you're voting for taxes without limit as to rate or amount. And be on your guard against unethical and illegal advertising from Austin Aisd. Here's one from Davis Elementary. There will probably be more. Please be on the lookout for misleading information. You would be voting for unlimited taxes. We don't need to do that. The district is losing money. We have choices, and people want more choices, not more taxes.
Monica?
The Save East Austin Schools PAC also asked voters to vote no on this bond, and we do agree that AISD needs the money, but it has not been distributed equitably. And the fact that only schools in East Austin will be closed or consolidated or sold through the bond is what is infuriating our members. And we ask voters to vote no.
So Austin Council of PTAs are urging voters to vote yes. We decided to vote yes, and it was a unanimous vote by a lot of PTAs, some of them in the East Austin. So even some East Austin, including Eastside Memorial PTA, voted yes to support the bond.
Which is a one-member
we
PTA.
We just need, no it's not, and I'll send you the records, no. What we need is to make sure our children deserve for us to make right choices. Our children deserve to go to schools that don't have leaky roofs. Our students deserve schools that they don't think that they're going to fall through the ground or trip over a wire or have a whole bunch of wires taped. They don't deserve that. They deserve buildings and they deserve programming. I totally agree. But without the building, you're not going to be able to implement the programming. So please vote yes.
And the reality of having a bond that allows us to modernize schools saves us money in the long run. It saves us on utilities, it saves us on M&O expenditures. This bond gives us the option, finally, of stopping the Band-Aids that allows us to modernize our schools for learning environments that every single one of our kids deserves without raising the taxes. Your taxes will be the same regardless of whether or not this bond passes. However, the tax rate will not go down if the bond fails because those needs that we mentioned earlier, the $4 billion, how are those going to get paid? At best, when we use what's left from contingency funds from 2013, we might be able to stretch a year of paying for emergency repairs. No new technology, no new buildings. Those medically fragile kids that Choni talked about at the Rosedale School, that's an old elementary school that was not built to be ADA or TSA accessible. Those kids deserve a facility that meets their needs and that also meets the academic needs that they have as well. Every single school deserves that, regardless whether it's in East Austin, West Austin, South, or North. Please vote yes for the bond, because what will happen if this bond fails is going to be incredibly detrimental to Austin ISD and to all of our students and families.
All right. Big thank you to all of our panel here for this very passionate discussion. We appreciate you guys giving both sides of the issue. We hope that our viewers watching online and on Facebook have gotten some of their questions answered. We appreciate that. And, of course, you can always learn more on our website, cbsaustin.com. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.